everybody, and welcome back to the Beef Up Front podcast here on Pick Swap Media. Host Ryan Coyle, joined by Joe Kometz for our last weekly show of the season for the college football show. From now on, after this, we'll excitingly, I guess you could say, be transitioning into full-time college basketball once a week, but then we will also have our college playoff preview episode as well as our national title preview. Those will be, smaller episodes than we've been giving you each and every week, but we'll have our full college basketball where we do the best 10 games of the weekend. Don't go as in-depth as we do on the football sometimes, but it's been a fun ride over these past 14 weeks here, Joe. Starting back in week 0, breaking down Nebraska Northwestern when Northwestern beat Nebraska in Ireland and then failed to come to the United States and win a game the rest of the season. And now here we are, conference title weekend. A lot of good games, not as good, I think, maybe as years past, but still, I think there's some potential for a lot of chaos, and I don't think the playoff field is anywhere near set in stone yet, so we got a lot to break down. Welcome back, Joe, and how are we?
I'm fantastic, Beef. Plenty of chaos, is up for grabs, like you said. I mean, last year, you and I had like our worst weeks by far picking when we did conference championship weekend last year. Kind of already looking through my picks. Out of the 10 games, I've picked 8 favorites based off of the spread. Maybe not necessarily to cover, but I've picked 8 favorites to win. So, you can already see that going, south pretty quickly. But this is it. This is now, we're going to see who's going to be in the playoff. This is kind of the last gasp for certain teams as well, like USC sitting there at 4. I know we'll get into that in a minute, but I'm really excited. This is a chance too, you'll also have an opportunity to watch teams like UTSA, who's 10-2, having a great season coming off of last year's great run. You're going to have a New Year's 6 participant with the winner UCF Tulane, which we'll get into a little bit later. Tulane having their best season since 1999. So a lot of great football, a lot of exciting football around the country this weekend. Let's dive right into it.
All right, before we hit into the games real quick, the rankings came out, recording this on Tuesday after the rankings. You got 1 Georgia undefeated, 2 Michigan undefeated, 3 TCU undefeated. They are all obviously in their conference title games. They are all in win and in scenarios. And you have 4 USC, I assume is a win and in as well. And then 5 Ohio State. I thought that they might have fell behind Alabama, and then you have Alabama sitting there at 6. Obviously, if all 4 of these top 4 teams win and in, obviously, conference title weekend could have something to say about that. What do you see as the scenario potentially, Joe, for this top 4 teams not getting in? I think Georgia and Michigan will be in regardless, win or lose their conference title game, but USC, if they lose, I don't think will be in, and TCU, I think, would be close. What's your opinion on that before we get into these games real quick?
Yeah, Beef. I kind of agree with you there. I think if USC loses, they're done. They'll put in Ohio State at 4 and have them play Georgia. If just TCU lost and USC won, I could see them just putting Ohio State at 4. If both TCU and USC lose, that's where the committee starts to have a discussion. Like, 1 loss TCU that made it all the way to their conference title game, and even though they lost to Kansas State, they have a win over Kansas State from earlier in the year, or a 2-loss Bama who didn't even win their division. This is where, like, Bama's sitting here at 6. Tennessee at 7, I think, is kind of a joke. If you're going off the head-to-head stuff, granted, Tennessee has a loss to South Carolina, but they also
the hottest team in the country.
I was going to say, hottest team in the country. They clearly rewarded that by putting Clemson only down to 9, only dropping them 1 spot. And then, they also lost to the number 1 team in the country, whereas Alabama has a loss to the 7 and now 14 with LSU at 9-3. But if LSU loses again to Georgia, Bama has a loss to a 4-loss team on their schedule, just like South Carolina is with Tennessee. So, I don't know how you can justify that. And maybe if that happens, the committee might say, well, wait a minute. Tennessee also smoked LSU and beat Bama. And Bama, that's kind of their biggest win they're hanging on to, or that biggest result is that LSU game. Their biggest win is, Mississippi State, who's 24th. Like, Alabama really hasn't, if you look through the schedule, Texas at 20, like Alabama hasn't really impressed. It's just, they've lost 2 games close.
On the
But
final play.
I was going to say, but you can also make the argument a couple plays go differently too. They're a 5-5 football team. So
it would be, I think, a better overall product if we found a way to get Georgia, Bama at 1-4 and then Michigan, Ohio State rematch at 2-3. That would be.
Yeah, I mean, there is a real
possibility.
possibility.
The viewings for that I think it would be the highest rated playoff ever.
Oh, I mean, yeah, for sure. Just because of the brands alone, it would definitely be up there. Like, I wouldn't rule out the SEC Big Ten Invitational. I really wouldn't rule it out. Why not? Why? But also, like, how awesome would that be to see Ohio State get another crack at Michigan? Not Bama. Screw Bama. But I think Georgia would smoke Bama. But that's a conversation for if we get there.
Yeah. Well, we'll be finding out live at the Beef Up Front tailgate at noon on Sunday. So that will be an exciting time for everyone will be huddled around your phone, Joe. You're the diagnosed man for that job. But now we got 10 games to get into. We won't be going as in depth as we usually do on our 5, but we have our 10 conference title games, all the Power 5 and the Group of 5, as well as our best bet and upset special from those games. We'll start off on Friday night. The Friday night game you mentioned already, Joe. Conference USA. You got North Texas at 7-5 at UTSA, who's 10-2, 7:30 on CBS Sports Network. UTSA -8 in this one, over under 66.5.
Shout out the Roadrunners. Great season last year. Went under the radar. They ended up, I think they were 11-1. They finished in the top 25 for the college football playoff. I think they lost in their bowl game, but I do know that they were 11-1 in the regular season. They won the conference title. They finished 12-1 after that. A great year. They kind of came out of nowhere in a year where if Cincinnati doesn't exist, they had a path to maybe be a New Year's Six team. But that Cincinnati team was just so great. But shout out the Roadrunners having another great season, have a chance to finish again 12-2 if they win out, if they win their their conference title game, win their bowl game. And no one's talking about the Roadrunners. Not really a lot of analysis in this because I won't lie, I haven't watched a second of either of these two teams. But UTSA, the one thing they have in the back of their mind, the one thing keeping them from perfection last year was North Texas. Even though they beat them earlier in the regular season, that still sits in the back of their head, and I guarantee you they're going to come pissed off. And I believe the Conference USA does it as in UTSA is hosting, right? They don't do neutral.
This is at the Alamo Dome.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a bumping crowd. They do get up for UTSA because that's kind of the only football show in town in San Antonio. They also have a pro-ready stadium. I mean, that's a great atmosphere for that university to have. So give me the Roadrunners here, 42-31. So covering that 8-point spread, and I'm taking the over of 66.5.
I like UTSA here too. I'll take them 38-28, UTSA -8, under 66.5. Roadrunners, best team in the conference. They did win that regular season matchup, like you said, Joe, 31-27. I think the difference in this one will be the Roadrunners' rush defense, allowing 149 yards per game, which isn't great, but they're facing a really good North Texas rushing attack that's averaging a little bit over 200 yards per game. I think this is a stable enough rushing defense to kind of slow that Mean Green attack, and if they're able to stabilize that, that's really what makes them go on offense. The UTSA quarterback is getting some potential pro looks as well. It pays off to have a guy like that in these big games. So I'll take UTSA to win, to cover, but the under to hit there by that half point. Second game of the week, maybe the one I'm looking forward to the most. This is a real fun Friday night one. I think this is going to be a really good battle here. The Pac-12 title game, number 11 Utah, who's 9-3, versus number 4 USC, who is 11-1. 8 o'clock on Fox. USC -2.5, over under 67.
Yeah, you could definitely make the argument that this is the biggest conference title game of the week, at least the most exciting. You can make the same argument for one that's coming up next. But I have USC winning this game 45-42. I just think Caleb Williams at this point won't be denied. And I mean, USC all season long was kind of shaky. But going into their last 2 regular season games, they had their 2 biggest tests with UCLA and Notre Dame, both top 25 teams. Now you get a chance to go to the Pac-12 title game to avenge your only loss on the season by 1 point on the road. They win this game. They avenge their loss. They'll lock up a playoff spot. could potentially get a 3 seed. I guarantee you USC, even though they might not say it out loud, is hoping if they win, they'll be watching the next day. They'll be the biggest Kansas State fans in America. Because, I mean, this is no disrespect to Michigan. I know Nate Kreitzer will, and his dad will tweet at me and call me out on Twitter, but I would still rather play Michigan than Georgia right now. That being said, 45-42 here, USC is my final, so I'll take them to cover the 2.5. I'll take the over of 67. And, I mean, not much else to say. I believe we've talked about USC the past 2 weeks. I won't go crazy in depth on them. Utah just kind of seems like they're perennially going to get to like the bar to the next level, but they won't be able to get over it. It just seems like right when they have a chance to take that next leap, they just can't do it. And they always end up playing spoiler. It's like always the bridesmaid, never the bride. Like they just can't get over that hump. And I think they're going to fall short again. It's going to be a close game late. I feel like Cam Rising is going to try to do a bit too much. Late turnover. Trojans here. Game-winning field goal.
Yeah, USC is in a great spot here with the game being on Friday night because they win, they know they're in, and then, like you said, they can go out and just watch and root for Kansas State to win on Saturday to get that, or to knock TCU most likely out, or at least TCU down to 4. But like you said, Utah, I think, is used to playing that spoiler role, and I'm going to ride with them here. I'm going to take them to win this one outright, 31-28 over USC. So Utah plus 2.5, under 67. Caleb Williams is awesome. Having watched USC, I'm not going to lie, most of the times I've had a few drinks in me. Last Saturday, I watched the game completely not drinking at all, completely sober that night, and really kind of just focused in on that game watching USC. And he was awesome, but I think he kind of needs a slice of humble pie and needs a good crack to the face from one of these opponents. He was out there being all flashy, trying to be Patrick Mahomes, running backwards 50 yards, running around. Then I'll throw a completion that'll wind up being for 5 yards, but it'll be on the highlight reel because it was a 25-second play. And I think that's something that the Utes are going to see all week. And under Kyle Whittingham, what they've done the best has just been a really physical program. And I think they're going to be out to get him in this one, give him a few, not say cheap shots, but maybe a hit or two after the whistle, just kind of let him know, like, you're not going to be able to pull off all that bullshit on us this week. I know it's really hard to beat teams twice in 1 year, but Lincoln Riley, when you look back at him, all the times he's made it to the playoffs, he's matched up against a more physical team, and that's where he's struggled. And I think that's why the Big Ten might be a bit of an adjustment for them, as they're used to playing this flashy style, air raid type of offense. Now you got to play some big boys, which they've already lost to this year, a physical team. I think that kind of that spells some problems for them in this one. Cam Rising is a very experienced quarterback. He had his way with USC in the first go-round, 3 touchdowns on the ground in that one. This was a team coming into the year I had penciled in as a playoff team with Utah. And if you lose this game, you lose 4 games on the year. I think that the season definitely gets deemed a disappointment. But if you knock off USC here, pretty much eliminate them from making the playoffs, and you win the Pac-12 title as Utah, not USC or UCLA or one of these bigger, more luxurious schools with more money, you do this at Utah, that's a really good historic season for them. So I'm going to take the Utes here, back-to-back Pac-12 champions, knock off USC, and eliminate them from the playoffs. So give me Utah 31, USC 28, Utah plus 2.5, and then under 67 there. So with my prediction so far, USC will be out of the playoff. You have them winning, so they would be in. Now we go to Saturday, another game that's going to have big implications in the playoffs. That's the Big 12 title game kicking off at noon. You got number 10 Kansas State at 9-3 versus number 3 TCU at 12-0. 12 o'clock on ABC. TCU minus 2.5 over under 62. I think TCU has been, in a positive way, the surprise team of the year, Joe.
Oh, for sure. Before I get into this game, Coyle, how awesome would it be if this was the year for the 12-team playoff? You have Kansas State at 10, Utah at 11. The 12 seed would be the winner of Tulane, UCF, because that's how they would do this with the 6 auto bids. And you'd basically have them playing elimination games with Washington and Florida State sitting at the first 2 out, being like, one of these 2 things breaks our way. All of a sudden, Florida State might be, getting in the playoff. Like, it's just crazy that that's a possibility. But Sadly, we're going to have to wait. And I think Bama being out will accelerate this thing because Bama will not be too happy about missing out in the playoff. But anyways, give me Kansas State here, 24-21 over TCU. As much as I want to say the Horned Frogs are the team of destiny, I can't say that they are. Like, they're due for a loss. They've had so many games this year where I was kind of, ragging on Bama before for saying they could be 5-5. TCU could be like 4-8 if a couple things break differently. They had a stretch of like 6 games where they injured the starting quarterback for the teams they played against. Like, it's just crazy the luck that they've had this season. And once again, TCU has been on a lot this year. Kansas State's been on a lot. Kansas State, I just feel like, is a more physical team. TCU was very big play oriented, flashy offenses. Even against Texas, I know they won a physical slugfest, but even in that game, they had 2 kind of broken pass throws that ended up being touchdowns. Like, if the big plays aren't there, TCU doesn't really scare me. So that being said, give me the Wildcats. Sitting at number 10, that loss to Tulane earlier in the year is really coming back to kill them, because especially this year with the playoffs, this would have opened the door for a potential 2-loss conference champ to sneak in. Mm-hmm. But that being said, not the case. Kansas State will win this game and finish like 6th, and they'll be like, we were right there. But shout out to Wildcats on a great season. And yeah, 24-21. So Kansas State to cover, obviously, and then the under of 62.
Yeah, obviously it's good to win a conference championship. You'll take that anytime, but they win this, I think they enter next year as a top 4 team, like one of the favorite, probably the favorite out of the Big 12, because you do have Will Howard coming back, who has really taken off since being given kind of the full-time starting gig over these last few weeks as Adrian Martinez has dealt with those injuries. I like Kansas State to win this one as well, Joe, 31-30. Kansas State plus 2.5, and then under 62 there. I was calling all year. It seemed like for TCU to have that setback. In the last few weeks, I kind of rode them. But I think that setback is still in line, and I think that's this week. They have answered the bell each and every time all year. Vegas has disrespected them each and every game. It seems like they were 7-point dogs against Texas. They were 2.5-point favorites against Baylor. Only 2.5-point favorites here in a team that they beat already earlier in the year by 10. They've just got no respect all year, and it wouldn't surprise me to see them continue to silence the doubters. But I just think that the setbacks here and the full-out chaos is upon us. I have the prediction of USC and TCU both losing, opening the door potentially for Alabama and Ohio State to make it in. I think Will Howard, though, continues his standout play. He proves that he does have a potential to be a pro quarterback. And I think Cinderella's glass slipper falls off. The magic has to run out at some point. If it doesn't run out here, I think it runs out with a 21-point or more loss to Georgia. I think Georgia will probably be at least a 17 or 18-point favorite in that game. But give me Kansas State here, 31-30. Instead of TCU winning on a last-second play like they've done a few times this year, I'll take the Wildcats with a last-second kick to win it. So Kansas State 31, TCU 30. Wildcats win the Big 12. And I believe, Joe, to give you some credit, I think you said at the beginning of the year they were one of your sleeper teams.
Yes, I had 2. I had them in Minnesota. Minnesota, although they were alive for the Big Ten West literally until the last week, but they still didn't have a great year. But I said they were going to be a playoff threat because I didn't think, if you told me the preseason that Tulane was going to go in and beat Kansas State, I would have said no way. But now here we are with Tulane being as good as they are. But yeah, no, Kansas State, like, they were a sleeper team. And even if they lose this game, they're going to be in a good bowl game, not a New Year's Six, because I think they'll be too low ranked, but they will be in a pretty solid bowl game if they lose, I think the Big 12 would give them their auto bid. So they would be in the Fiesta Bowl, I believe. Could be wrong, but
too much scenarios.
Yeah, not doing this right now.
All right, we got 2 group of 5 games here back to back. We'll hit on these quickly. We got some action, the MAC title game. Toledo at 7-5 versus Ohio at 9-3. This is another noon kickoff on ESPN. Toledo -3 over under 58. Quick thoughts on this game, Joe?
Ohio 31, Toledo 28. I'm taking Ohio to cover the 2.5-point spread. Honestly, not a lot to say. I think I saw Toledo play one action game and they lost, and I bet on them, so I'm picking against them. That's all I got.
I got Ohio winning. I got them winning pretty comfortably. I'll take them 35-27, so Ohio plus 3 over 58. I like the upset in this one. Ohio is one of the MAC teams I have seen, or at least have had money on throughout the season, where I've been kind of tracking them throughout games. And if we know one thing about them from that one, I believe it was your best bet the one week. It was Fordham, Ohio, the over in that game. This team can move the ball, it can score the ball. They're putting up over 30 points a game. They also haven't lost since October 1st, and they're playing their best ball at the right time. So also have a better record than Toledo. I know they played a pretty weak non-conference, but give me Ohio in this one. I think it's their time to claim that MAC title. Go to the Sun Belt now. You have Coastal Carolina, who sits at 9-2. They didn't play one game this year due to Virginia being their opponent, and that was the week of the unfortunate shooting. So they're sitting there at only 11 games played this year, and they're playing 10-2 Troy, 3:30 on ESPN for the Sun Belt title game. Troy -9, over under 47.5.
For those who don't know, James Madison won the Sun Belt East this year. Their first year coming up from the FCS, 1AA, to FBS full-time D1 football. But because of a stupid NCAA rule, they're not allowed to play in the postseason. That includes the conference championship game, and they cannot play in a bowl game, even though I believe they also finished 9-2 with a better Sun Belt record than Coastal. They beat Coastal handily to end the season. So justice for James Madison. I'm taking Troy 27-14. This is a big ball don't lie moment, especially without Grayson McCall for Coastal Carolina. Going to Troy, who's 10-2, has a chance. You know, when you have a chance to win 12 games in a season, that's a very impressive stat. They'll probably finish, if they win this game, I wouldn't be surprised if the playoff committee maybe throws them a bone and just puts them at like 25th, because I think they deserve it. They will at least, Troy, if they win out, be 12-2. I think they'll be ranked in the final AP poll to end the season. So shout out the Trojans, taking them -9. I'm taking the under 47.5.
Yeah, when I saw that Troy was sitting at 10-2, and I saw Georgia Tech hired today their interim coach to be their full-time head coach, I was kind of surprised by that. I know he went 4-4 with them, but I thought I'm not even sure who the Troy coach is off the top of my head, but leading Troy to 10-2 and down there in that South region, he probably has some pretty good connections with the recruiting. I thought maybe they should have given that coach head look. I assume if this Troy head coach isn't getting a new job this year, I assume he will be on the list at some of the top of these teams' lists coming into next year. I have them winning this Sun Belt title game 20-13 over Coastal. So I'll take Coastal +9, under 47.5. The big thing here is Grayson McCall, one of the more underrated quarterbacks, I guess you could say, or at least talked about quarterbacks that is awesome in college football just due to playing at Coastal in the group of 5. He will not be playing in this game, and that really changes the entire dynamic. He really has been the heart and soul kind of this program the past few years. Remember, they had that awesome game a few years ago against future Jets Hall of Fame quarterback Zach Wilson in that back and forth BYU Coastal game. But just with no McCall in the lineup, I don't see a path for the Chanticleers to win this one. Also, Joe, Troy is a Hail Mary in that App State game away from being 11-1. So one of the best group of 5 teams in the country.
Yeah, Coyle. Honestly, I kind of forgot. That feels like it was years ago.
Yeah.
Remember App State? Remember how they were a story? They finished 6-6 with 2 wins over FCS schools. I don't know what happened to App State. They beat A&M. I know A&M obviously had a bad year, but oh my gosh, like I remember thinking App State, I'm like, that team's going to be a New Year's 6 team this year. And now Troy is sitting here. What else did they lose to? I'm pulling up their schedule right now.
I think it was Ole Miss.
Yes, 28-10 to Ole Miss.
Week 1,
I mean,
I believe.
You could honestly make an argument if Troy doesn't lose in that Hail Mary, like you said, Coyle. Troy might be, we might have been here sitting, depending on what happens to the American, Troy might be going to a New Year's 6 game, but
it might have been ranked too.
Yeah, I think they would have definitely. 11-1, it'd be tough to keep it. Even if you play a D2 schedule, 11-1, you deserve to be at least 25th.
All right, back to some big boy games. We go to the SEC now. Number 14 LSU sitting at 9-3 after last week's disappointing loss to Texas A&M knocked them out of their long shot, I guess you could say, chance of the playoff. But still, they had a clear path there. They'll be playing number 1 Georgia at 12-0. 4 o'clock on CBS, Georgia minus 16.5, over under 51.
I mean, I know it was a look-ahead spot, but you can't go into 4-win A&M at the time. And it's not like they lost on like they were handled the entire game. Like that game was just A&M kind of had control the entire time. I just feel like this is one of those losses. Like year one, Brian Kelly is just going great, especially after that Florida State loss, how you turned it around. But I mean, that's a gut punch. Like the wind is kind of out of the sails there at LSU. I have them covering the 16.5. I have Georgia winning 33-20. I also have the over of 51, which I'm not a fan of. I'll probably stay away from that in real life, but I'll give the pick of 51 here. This Georgia team just seems loaded. And this is a Georgia team, people forget, did not win the SEC last year. Alabama did beat them. And all jokes aside, if that didn't happen, Notre Dame would have been in the playoff last year. But Georgia, is playing pissed off. They're looking at a field where, I mean, even like, besides Michigan, TCU doesn't scare me. And USC, if you can contain Caleb Williams, they don't scare me, especially with Travis Dye being injured. So give me the Bulldogs here, and I feel like this is going to prop them up for a back-to-back run.
Yeah, I like Georgia here too, Joe. And I like them to cover. I like them to win 37-20, so minus 16.5 and over 51. I still, though, year one under Brian Kelly, after losing that pretty crazy week one game to Florida State, it's very impressive for them to kind of rebound. It sounded like a bunch of guys hated him at the beginning of the season. There was a bunch of talk about some of their top players entering the transfer portal, and they've really righted the ship and turned this around. Even if they lose this game 9-4, see what happens in a bowl game. I don't really count those as much anymore just because of the lack of players playing in them due to opt-outs. But still, I think this was a really good year one. And if they can make this a ball game, that's something that I think they really can hang their hats on going into the offseason. Georgia just at another level than them right now. I wouldn't be surprised to see these two teams back at it again next year. I like the Tigers, though, to make this pretty interesting and cover the halftime spread. I like whatever that play would be. I think it would probably be +8. I didn't see what it exactly was, but I think that they go into this game at halftime down by under a touchdown. But I think Georgia and their experience prevails in the end, and Georgia enters college football playoff as the number one team in the country, which they've been for most of the year. So give me Georgia minus 16.5 and over 51. Go to the American now, a rematch from a game we had on the show a few weeks ago. Number 22 UCF at 9-3, at number 18 Tulane 10-2. After all that nonsense that went down last week on the show that we talked about with the seeding or the who plays who where. This one will be decided on ABC at 4 o'clock. Tulane -3 over under 57.5. And before we get into that, Cincinnati head coach Luke Fickell leaves Cincinnati to go to Wisconsin. If Cincinnati had won this week or won last week, do you think he still would have left, or at least the process would have just been delayed? I was kind of the timing of that was weird. It sounded like the deal was set in stone on like Friday, but I think he would have coached this week if they were hosting that title game.
Yeah, I think it would have been delayed until at least before the bowl game, because that's normally when you see the coaches leave. But this was kind of would have been a similar situation, Coyle, to Billy Napier last year, Louisiana Lafayette. They announced he was going to Florida, but then he said he was going to still coach the conference title game. And then
he wound up not coaching it, right?
I don't know. I think he might have actually. Or I think he wasn't going to, and then he did last minute. I don't know. That's a last year thing that we probably went in this exact same style of conversation in last year's conference title preview show. But Tulane, I think, is going to win this game 42-38 because of two things. One, revenge factor. They lost earlier in the year at home to UCF. Two, their coach was rumored to take the Georgia Tech job. That ended up falling through last minute. Their coach saying, no, I'm staying. That is huge. That's a huge boost of confidence. I'm really upset that I'm blanking on the running back's name, but he's a machine. He got invited to the Senior Bowl. He's probably going to be first team all conference at running back. I'm really mad I'm forgetting his name. But give me the green wave here, 42-38. I think UCF and Gus Malzahn are like a year away. The problem is that next year they're going to the Big 12 where they're taking a step up in competition. So, that's going to be interesting to see how they do going forward. But this is huge for Tulane in terms of the future of their program. Because if they can win the conference and they can start telling recruits, hey, the three best teams are all leaving to go to the Big 12. We are going to have a chance to run this new conference. I mean, that's something that, will definitely help with the recruits, especially being in the New Orleans area. I'm surprised they don't actually have at least more competitive teams. I'm not saying playoff contenders or New Year's Six contenders, but at least competing for bowl eligibility. Tulane, for most of our lives, Coyle, has been kind of like a laughing stock, in all honesty. So I think this is great for the Green Wave, and this is great for the American because they can start posting other schools on their commercial that doesn't involve the UConn teams that won national titles there in the Big East. Cincinnati going to the playoff when they're gone. UCF and Houston winning New Year's Six games now they're gone. So, I mean, I think this is big for the future of the conference, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's some people behind the scenes, like the conference commissioner, secretly rooting for Tulane.
Yeah, that running back is Tyjae Spears, 181 yards and 2 touchdowns last week. But back to recruiting Tulane, they're like a better academic version of Coastal, like a huge party school, but they're also like great academic school. So I guess it's kind of hard with that. But like you said, Joe, if they can sell their recruits on conference champion and the coach turned down a pretty big job to stay here, we'll see if that's for long term. But I think that's another feather in their cap there. I'm going to take Tulane to win this one, with a big reason being the coach returning, just like you said. I think that's a big thing, big boost of confidence for these guys. I'll take them 33-31. A little bit unsure for this head-to-head, so I'll take UCF to cover that +3 over 57.5 hitting there. Haven't really had a good read on this conference all year, but I think that's fun and just kind of an exciting way to go about this. It's been very competitive and very relevant conference this year for the American, and they've played on the national stage like a few times. They've had some standalone like weekday games that have provided some pretty good entertainment for the college football viewer. And they've been against each other, especially just like going back and forth. It was like Cincinnati kind of ran this conference top to bottom last year. This year, it's been a nice little battle at the top of the conference. So I think that's been a good way for this conference, for what we've known it as over these past almost decade now, I guess, for to be a good way to go out. And I think shaping up to be a really nice American Conference title game before these guys do the big boys do wind up going over to the Big 12. I think we're going to be in store for a nice matchup here. I do like Tulane to win this one. Being at home, I think, is a big factor as well. They get their revenge from a few weeks ago here. So, but I'll take UCF to cover that +3, but the over of 57.5 to hit. Now we go to the Mountain West, where we have 8-4 Fresno State at Boise State, who's 9-3. 4:00 on Fox. Boise State -3.5, over under 51.5.
I am going to take the under, and I'm going to take Boise State -3.5. I have Boise State winning this game 24-17. I don't know why. I just got a feeling this game is going to be a slugfest. These are two teams that, have been rumored a lot with, the Pac-12 kind of in limbo about maybe getting invites to the new Pac-12. They've been kind of, especially Boise State. I mean, Boise State's been the dominant group of 5 west of the Mississippi basically our entire lives.
Been like Gonzaga of college football.
They honestly are. I even saw a tweet that the Big 12 was talking about doing a football-only thing with Boise State to kind of like supplement Gonzaga not having a football team. It's funny that you say that, Coyle. I don't know how much legs that had to it. I know Gonzaga going there is real, but this game at the Blue Turf, I mean, Boise State, just when, Coyle, we watched that game at your house when we went to that Phillies game. They lost on the road to UTEP. And I listened to the Barstool podcast that weekend on the drive back, and it said Boise State's time as like one of the elite mid-majors is dead. They were like ripping Boise State, saying they're done. Well, they have a chance to go 10-3 with another conference championship and potentially go 11-3 if they win their bowl game. So I think Boise State's doing just fine still. They're definitely the most successful program in that conference. And I think this is actually a pretty big rivalry game out in the Mountain West, I believe. I believe they play for like the Oil Drum or something like that. Give me the Broncos here. Big home environment. Shout out Boise State. And, This is going to be a team that will be playing and using this on a national stage on Fox as kind of an audition tape going forward. Like, hey, if you want us, we can support a Power 5 team in this stadium.
Yeah, I think going back to what you were saying about Boise being so dominant, it's been impressive too that they've had quite a few different coaches in there during that time as well, and they've still maintained this level of excellence. So, big shout out to them. But I think that level of excellence will not be on display this weekend. I'm taking my Fresno State Bulldogs here, 31-23. Fresno plus 3.5 over 51.5. Bulldogs have their star back, QB Jake Haener. Was rumors that he was going to transfer to Washington. Good thing he didn't, because Michael Penix has really lit it up all year. But he was banged up at the beginning of the year. But since he got back into the lineup the last week of October, they have not lost. They've been playing their best ball. This guy can go out there and sling the ball all around the yard. This could be his last chance at a Mountain West title, as he will be a senior, or he is a senior this year, but who knows? He could have another year or two of eligibility with all these different things. But he has a chance to kind of cement himself as one of the three best quarterbacks in Fresno State history. That might not be saying much, but the other two are David and Derek Carr. Derek Carr, who's gone on to have a pretty successful NFL career, and David Carr was a former number 1 overall pick. So if you're kind of mentioned in those guys' breath, that's a really nice career. And I think a Mountain West title would really cement him as one of the better players in program history there. Devontae Adams, Ryan Matthews also went there, some other pretty good NFL players. So little history there for Fresno State, but I think he's the best player on the field, and I think he has something to prove in this one. I think that the Bulldogs find a way to win. They were a highly talked about team this offseason. He was never really healthy at the beginning of the year, and now that he's back and healthy, they've been rolling. I like them to catch Boise off guard a little bit here. Boise won the regular season matchup 40-20. Haener was out of the lineup, though. Give me Fresno State 31, Boise 23. So Fresno plus 3.5 and over 51.5. All right, last two games. We go to some more big boy games now. We go to the Big Ten. Really don't think there's much to say about this one, Joseph. You got 8-4 Purdue. Credit to them. I thought that they, coming into the year, had a pretty good chance to be like around an 8-4, 9-3 team. I had picked them, I remember, week 1 to beat Penn State. Narrowly lost that one, but they were able to turn around and have a pretty good year. 8-4 in the Big Ten is still 8-4. I don't care what side you're on, but they now get to play number 2 Michigan, who dominated Ohio State last week at 12-0. 8 o'clock on Fox. Michigan minus 16 over under 50.5.
I got Michigan winning this game 35-17. I mean, not much else to say. I mean, great season for Purdue. Listen, I don't care that they play in the Big Ten West. I don't care how bad the Big Ten West is. You won your division. You get a chance to play in the conference title game. Great season for Purdue. They're going to be in a bowl game. I feel like they're going to win their bowl. Like, I know obviously no one thinks it's going to happen, but Purdue has a chance to win 10 games. They would, have to beat Michigan first. But they have a chance to play in the Rose Bowl if they win this game. It's crazy. Like, if you told Purdue that, their season, they'd finish 8-4, but they'd still make it to the conference title game, I think all the Purdue fans would kind of be, ready to roll with that.
Boilermaker faithful would be behind you.
Yeah, I mean, the Boilermakers, get a chance to show out. The game is in Indianapolis. Purdue is in Indiana. I feel like you're going to have a better Purdue crowd than you think. I know Michigan travels well, but all last week said is just that Michigan's legit and that I was an idiot for doubting them. And I think they're going to prove that this weekend, just like they did with Iowa last year. I remember thinking, never thought a conference title game would be a letdown spot, but they smoked Iowa, and I think they're going to just control this game against Purdue, and they're going to win this game pretty handily.
Yeah, that was my whole take going into last week's Michigan-Ohio State game. I remember I was like, I don't know if either of these teams is actually very good. And I thought maybe they were kind of walking a little bit through the season, just waiting for the big game. And Michigan turned it on last week for sure. They impressed me a lot, especially in the second half. They just wore down Ohio State. I think they do the same thing to Purdue here, wear them out again. I'll go Michigan 35, Purdue 14, Michigan minus 16, over 50.5. I think last week's win, though, Michigan, it told me that they can compete with Georgia if they make it to the title game to face them. I don't think they will beat them necessarily, and I think they'll probably be a 7-point underdog, but that running game they have is legit. And They have a stable of running backs, even with Corum out. They still did a bunch of damage. And you combine that with some timely throwing from J.J. McCarthy, as well as the dual threat element that he brings to the table, that makes them really hard to defend. I think Purdue's just overmatched here. Michigan doesn't want to mess around either. They want to blow them out, give no reason to possibly fall in the standings or something. I think that they'll keep their foot on the gas pedal. They know they have a long few-week rest coming up as they prepare for the title game or the college football playoff. I think that they cover this spread pretty easily. So I like them 35-14 here. So that'll be Michigan minus 16, and then under of 50.5 hitting there with 49 total points. All right, last game that we will be breaking down for the regular season or conference titles, whatever you want to call it. Bittersweet moment, but a pretty good game to finish us off with. That's the ACC title game. Number 9 Clemson at 10-2 versus number 23 UNC, who's 9-3. 8 o'clock on ABC. Clemson minus 8, over under 61.5.
I mean, a game that, if we went back a couple weeks ago, had some serious juice. That kind of just feels deflated here. I'm going with Clemson 30-20 just because I think their defense is better. And I mean, North Carolina the last 2 weeks has looked like a special kind of awful. But you want to talk about special kind of awful? I mean, DJ went, I believe, 8 for 29 for 98 yards against South Carolina and like a pick. Like, that's disgusting. He'll be in the transfer portal after the season because they're going to just get ready.
I think he'll be in the transfer portal Sunday morning.
Probably. Yeah. This is going to be the Klubnik show. And Dabo just keeps getting up there and defending him. And, oh, it's not DJ's fault we lost. Well, whose fault is it then, dude? Because he stinks. I mean, it's crazy how bad he is. I just trash Clemson. I'm still saying they're going to beat North Carolina by 10. But the committee keeping them at 9 kind of scares me. Because if we have chaos here, Coyle, and they blow out North Carolina, there's going to be whispers about Clemson sneaking into the playoff. That's all I'm going to say. I don't think it should happen, but that's all I'm going to say.
Well, as that happens, I get the Rothstein tweet. Clemson does not foul, and Penn State ties the game and sends it to OT. So that just could be some bad fortune there. I like UNC to win. I'm going to take them 38-35 here. UNC plus 8 over 61.5. Like you were saying, Joe, real disappointing end to the season, and I think a bad look for the ACC by both these teams. They really have had their wagon hitched, I guess you could say, to Clemson for the past decade or so, and now they've kind of faltered over these past 2 years. I don't trust DJ in a big spot, and Drake May sounds like he's going to be in conversation to be the number 1 pick with Caleb Williams. So I think this is a big chance for him on the big stage. There's going to be plenty of NFL scouts there in attendance to watch a lot of the guys on that Clemson defensive line going up against a potential top overall pick at quarterback next year. You're going to have a lot of eyeballs on this one. This is a big game for him to potentially catapult himself into being, the guy heading into next season, especially if Caleb Williams has some struggles against Utah. I think we see the end of DJ's time here at Clemson. Like I said, I think he could be in the transfer portal as early as Sunday morning. I think he kind of struggles in the first half, and we get the Cade Klubnik show in the second half. That's my bold prediction. We see him and Drake May kind of duel it out in what potentially could be a preview at next year's ACC title game between two really highly regarded quarterbacks. So I think UNC wins and Clemson doesn't win the ACC for back-to-back years for the first time since, I don't have the exact year, but for a pretty long time. They've really ran this conference under Dabo, especially in the whole run with Deshaun Watson, Kelly Bryant thrown in there, Trevor Lawrence. I almost forgot him as well. But I think it's a bit of a changing of the guard here, and we see the Tar Heels win this one. I like that plus 8 a lot, and definitely sprinkle some on the money line because I have them winning outright there. Last time I told you to sprinkle money line was South Carolina over Tennessee, so pat myself on the back. All right, last 2 things, quick hitters. As usually, we pick some games outside of the realm for our upset special and best bet. We can't do that just due to the lack of games this week. There are 11 games this week. There's also Buffalo, Akron. You want to touch on that, Joe, for your best bet?
Yes, I did it on purpose so we could talk. Coyle, it's funny you say that because as I'm looking at the slate, literally I think since we've started the show, a 12th game has been added this week.
Was it Valpo, New Mexico State, right?
Yes, Valpo, New Mexico State. I mean, New Mexico State had a game canceled earlier in the year because I believe there was a shooting at San Jose State, so they canceled the game, or a football player passed away. He was in a car accident or something like that.
Yeah, it was
So
a
they're
shooting
making
a
that
few
game up.
weeks ago.
No, that's what it was.
And New
But
Mexico State, New Mexico State wins. They go bowling. I believe I remember seeing they filed an appeal.
yeah, they'd finished 6-6, so I believe they would go bowling, and that's why I pick Buffalo minus 11.5. They're 5-6. They win this
Oh
game.
wow.
They're bowl eligible. And I mean, Akron, you're sitting there at 2-9. The game gets canceled because of snow. You think your season's over? Hey guys, we're gonna play Friday at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and we're just gonna go to Buffalo and we're gonna get our dicks kicked in. I mean, Akron is a bad football team. They always have been, I think, our entire lives, but they're also one of my favorite NCAA football dynasty teams
Of
to
course.
turn them around and eventually bring them into the Big Ten. But I'm going Buffalo here minus 11.5 just because of that reason. I don't know anything about the two teams. I just feel like if you're Buffalo, you at least have a chance to play in a bowl game, and that's always a cool experience. But if you're Akron, you got to be like, fuck, like let's just end the season. This is terrible. But that's kind of my only logic behind it. I'm gonna put $10 on it. I'm gonna still be at working at Berwick Elementary School that day, so I'll get to check that game throughout the rest of my day there. And my upset pick, just for the official record, I have Ohio over Toledo. They were plus 106 on the money line. I know, not that great. I just don't have a lot of faith in the underdogs this week.
All right, my upset of the week, already touched on this. I'm going to go with Fresno State. They're plus 135 as they're plus 3.5 dogs right here. I like that. At plus 135, like I was talking about, Jake Haener, I think he's the best player on the field this week. I think he's got something to prove. And with him healthy and in the lineup, the Bulldogs are a different team. They avenged that loss from Boise State earlier in the year. And then my best bet, last and final one of our, I guess, regular season show. Sad moment, typing those numbers in, but that's under 47.5 in the Troy Coastal game. Troy has played 2 games this year where they won 10-9 and 10-6. Coastal is without their star quarterback who helps them really move the ball. Troy, very good defensive team. I don't think Coastal will be able to move the ball. I had that, I believe 20-13 was my pick in that one. Even if that game is like a 24-17-ish type of affair, you're still hitting there. So under 47.5, not the biggest number, but I think Troy's defense comes to play, and Coastal missing their best player obviously is going to affect that. But that'll do it for the College Football Conference title show. Bittersweet episode, but next Thursday we'll be coming back at you with college basketball, where we'll be breaking down the best 10 games of the weekend from Friday to Sunday. So been a fun season here. We still have our playoff preview as well as our national title preview to get into, but any closing remarks before we head out on another season here, Joe?
No, I mean, we'll see you next week for college basketball. One thing I will say, because we won't have a show next week for it, I don't care what the spread is. I'm taking Army over Navy. That is my pick.
We'll break it down on the college basketball show.
That's fantastic.
All right. Well, we will talk to everyone next week as we transition into college basketball. Enjoy the conference title games. We should be in store for some good ones. Make sure to fade our picks, and we will talk next season, I guess.